Hey everyone, I wanted to go ahead and take some time to talk about a tougher topic, and that is racism. I would be doing a disservice if I didn't address the racism that the AAPI community faces, both historically but also today. And this isn't to say that that our oppression is worse than other minorities' experiences. That's not what this is about. As one of my friends has said, and something that I've started saying is that we as minorities aren't in the work of the oppression Olympics. It's not a competition, but all these experiences are valid, and we are all facing the same beast, and that is racism. That is hate. That is hate just because you are different, just because you are black, just because you are Asian, just because you're different. And every single human being deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, just like anybody else would want for themselves. And unfortunately, though, that's not always the experience as someone who is Asian. Historically, there's been a lot of hate against Asian people, but you probably, unless you sought it out, don't know about it. I've been through K through 12th grade, a private college, and seminary, and granted, I wasn't like a history buff or a history major and stuff like that, so you could use that as an excuse. But all throughout that, I really wasn't taught anything about the ways in which Asians were treated historically. It's not to say that it was all bad all the time, but there's a lot of instances throughout history, throughout American history, in which they were oppressed. And again, I didn't learn about this stuff through school. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but during World War II, FDR installed Japanese internment camps on American soil. And I didn't know about this until I watched an episode of Hawaii Five-0. I learned through a Netflix TV show called Ugly Delicious, which is a fantastic show. It's about food and culture and bridging worlds together. It's beautiful. It's great. You should watch it. But I didn't know until an episode where they were talking about Asian cuisine. I learned that when Asian people immigrated, specifically Asian men, they were oppressed. And Asian men, it was hard for them to find work outside of what was considered women's work, like cooking and cleaning and laundromats and stuff like that. And so you see why so many of these businesses are Asian owned or Asian run. It's because of the way that they were oppressed in history. And specifically Asian men, they were treated in this way. They were pushed towards these women's work kinds of jobs because the white men were trying to emasculate them, because they were intimidated by them, because they were threatened by them, and so they sought to emasculate them, and it worked. Because even though we may not be necessarily treated in that same way, just think about all of the Asian jokes that you know. Think about the ways in which a lot of Asian people are portrayed on media. It's emasculating. All of it. And so I have felt the remnants of that kind of hate throughout history. And so it doesn't matter that I wasn't an immigrant back in that day. I am still feeling those effects and witnessing those effects today. And I'm not here to pretend like I am some kind of historian or expert or anything like that, but there are so many other instances in which Asian people were oppressed, but I'm not going to get into that. That's not the purpose of this video. I'm going to link down below some places that you can look, as well as I encourage you to find these things out for yourselves, because there's just so much, and I believe these people do a lot better job of articulating and sharing those things than I will or can. But please go brush up on your history and really start to see us, not just today, but the ways in which people have been treated, and that will help inform you on how people are being treated today. And racism, even though I would say that the experience of being Asian has improved, racism is still quite evident today, and it's been evident even without the coronavirus. But the coronavirus has been a big variable in the rise in Asian hate, I believe. There's a lot of fear and a lot of hate towards Asian people because of the coronavirus, and I believe it is unjust. And there's all kinds of attacks. I've seen a statistic recently where it said that there has been an increase by 150% in the attacks against Asian people. And it's largely women, largely elderly folk, but there's still attacks of all kinds, and it's just horrific to watch. And unfortunately, it's not publicized in the media a lot. You won't see it on your newsfeed a whole lot unless you're seeking it out, because we're not a hot topic. We're not necessarily important in some ways. And so it's absolutely heartbreaking, but just because you're not seeing it, know that it's out there, know that it's happening. And beyond the horrific attacks, racism manifests in all kinds of jokes, like calling people the China virus or whatever, Kung flu. And it doesn't matter where you are or who you are. If you're Asian, it's probably happening to you. I can't imagine being a kid in school in this day and age. Just the jokes and the bullying, I can't imagine that. And it's not just them, it's even professional basketball players. Jeremy Lin is a famous basketball player, and even he testifies to how people would call him China virus on the basketball court. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are. If you're Asian, you're probably experiencing it. And again, it's not just because of the coronavirus. You can see systemic racism at play in the attacks back in March in the Atlanta area, where 6 Asian women were shot and killed. And it was ruled as not a hate crime, but the reality is that racism has its hooks in that moment quite clearly to me. Even if that person wasn't racially motivated, the way in which Asian women have been portrayed and fetishized and treated, to say that racism isn't involved in that situation is just to be completely wrong. Whether it's indirect or direct racism is quite evident, and it's rearing its ugly head constantly, and yet a lot of people are unwilling to accept that reality, willing to address it, willing to call it out. And so for me, I've been one of the fortunate ones in the ways in which I have been oppressed or treated. It hasn't been life-threatening. It hasn't been physical for the most part, but I also recognize the privileges that I have. Being a man, being younger, being over 6 foot tall, being over 250 pounds, I'm not necessarily the type of person that a lot of people target, but I don't take that privilege lightly. And it doesn't mean that I haven't experienced forms of racism and oppression. Oftentimes, it's not uncommon for me to be the only Asian or the only minority in the rooms that I'm in, and it's been that way my entire life. Just the ways in which people stare at you, sometimes the ways in which people react to you. It doesn't matter that I spent just a few months in South Korea, but my entire life in America. I'm not from here, and I am not American, and a lot of people make that quite clear to me. And I don't believe they do that out of hatred, but hatred or not, you feel those kinds of effects. And it doesn't matter if it's in schools or in churches or in public. I've experienced racism everywhere. And again, I've been one of the lucky ones, and the way I describe it is that there's types of racism that are like stab wounds, and I don't believe I've experienced that kind, but for me, it's like paper cuts. But when you get a ton of paper cuts, it really starts to add up, and you feel that, and you start to see the scars, and it's harder to ignore those cuts as time continues on, as they continue to happen. If you can think of an Asian joke, it's been made to me, and I try to brush it off and laugh along and not let it affect me, but it does. There was a movie that came out when I was in high school called Gran Torino, made and acted by Clint Eastwood, and I don't believe this was his intent. But what that film did for people like me was educate other people, specifically white people, about Asian slurs. And so around that time of that movie, I saw an uptick in Asian slurs being used, and I've been called every single Asian slur in the book. And there were times where I didn't necessarily understand what that meant. There were times where I really tried to show that it wasn't affecting me so that I could appear tough, and I didn't want them to see how it was affecting me. But yeah, I knew, even without knowing, just how wrong it was, just the ways in which they were trying to emasculate and oppress and put me in my place. Another form of racism that I've experienced is being tokenized. And so I want to talk a little bit about that in case you don't know what that means, as well as to try to explain it. But again, I don't pretend to be an expert on this, but this is how I understand it and articulate it and explain it to other people. And so to be tokenized is to be used as a prop, essentially. And if you are a prop, then you are less than human. It doesn't matter who you are or what you do, you are just there to be a placeholder. And it doesn't matter what's underneath, what only matters is your skin. And so there are times in which being tokenized and being empowered can look very similarly. And so it can be confusing at times as to if something is about empowerment or being tokenized. For me, how I describe it is that it all depends on the intent. What is their intention by this action? If it's just to use you as a means to an end, and therefore treating you as less than a human being, then it's tokenization. If it's because they know you and they care about you and they believe in you, I believe that that is them elevating you to be able to try to be a voice or a role model to other people. And as I have continued to grow in my ethnic awakening, and as I believe a lot of other people continue to journey along, we learn very quickly how to read those situations, and we see very clearly if it's being tokenized or if it's being empowered. I have declined a lot of opportunities over the past few years because I see through the tokenization, and I will not allow myself to be used in those kinds of ways any longer. I think a lot of people look at moments of tokenization and they see it as privilege, and they're like, I don't get those opportunities, so why are you complaining about being tokenized? Again, it goes to the human aspect. To be tokenized is to have privileges in a sense, but at the cost of your humanity. And to me, that's just not worth it. And I don't say all of this, and I mean all of this, the historical side, the present side, my own personal stories. I don't say all of this to paint myself as a victim, because I'm not a victim. I refuse to allow myself to be a victim any longer, and so that is why I am standing up and speaking out. And I hope and pray that for those who are being oppressed, that they have others that they can turn to. I hope that they know that they are not in this alone. I hope that they are able to share the hurts and the burdens and are able to find sanctuary in the presence of real, authentic relationships. These are things that I didn't have until I got older, and I wish now looking back that I had that. But that is why I am committing to move forward in a different way than I was before. That is why I am speaking up and speaking out and wanting to help educate other people, wanting to help bring about changes. And again, I don't say all of this to point you to me as an expert, because I am far from an expert. I am still learning a whole lot right now, but I would be happy to point you in other kinds of directions that might be helpful as you continue in your journey, whether you are part of the AAPI community or whether you are wanting to support the AAPI community. I hope that we will use the the horrible things that are happening right now in our world, and use that as ways in which we will continue to progress forward and advocate for change, so that these kinds of things no longer happen. Whether they're as big as shootings and attacks and killings, or whether they are simply the jokes that people are making about other people. I hope that we are able to help build a different world for those who are going to be coming behind us, whether it is the generation that is already here or the generations to come. And so this whole video series, it's designed to be a celebration, but I truly don't believe that you can fully celebrate without fully understanding the hardships that come with being a minority, that come with being a part of the AAPI community. And so I believe it's important to recognize and address those areas of history and present day and our lives. But I also hope that we are able to show embrace and love and support as well. So if you made it this far into the video, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Thank you for taking the time to learn. If you are part of the AAPI community, I hope that this was encouraging to you, and I hope that it encourages you to be able to share in with other people. And if you are not a part of the AAPI community, I hope that this has helped you see us a little bit more, and that we can continue to move forward together, because this beast that we call racism, it's not going to just go away. It's not going to happen unless people start changing, and I truly believe that change happens one person at a time, and I don't believe that people are going to change unless they care. And so please keep learning, keep growing, keep having the humility to learn and grow in your own life, and address the ways in which you need to change. And I've been doing that in my life, and I hope and I pray that you will do that as well. And together, by those changes in each and every one of our lives, we can start to make a difference, and we can start to help rid the world of racism one heart at a time.